My name is Morgan. I am 32 years old, and my father, Gregory, has been forgetting my birthday for as long as I can remember. Every year he throws bigger and bigger brand launch parties for my sister Alyssa, packed with influencers, champagne towers, and networking guests. And every year, my own birthday is treated like a typo in his busy schedule. This year he forgot again. He was too busy closing a deal for Alyssa's lifestyle brand. But I did not pretend it was fine. I took the $320,000 in savings. He never asked about money earned from 10 years of grit in landscape architecture, and I signed papers he never saw. I bought a dilapidated A-frame cabin high in the Rockies, a property he had called worthless. When the keys were in my hand, I did one simple thing. I took a picture on the rotting deck, overlooking the valley he thinks he owns, and posted it with one short caption. "The view is better from here." I didn't tag him. I just put it out there and went back to sanding the floors. Before I tell you how he tried to use the city council to burn my career to the ground, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I want to see how far this story of reclaiming your own summit can travel. My phone buzzing against the dusty floorboards sounded less like a notification and more like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. It vibrated so hard it actually moved across the wood, inching toward the edge of the deck, as if it wanted to jump. I picked it up, expecting the usual spam call, or maybe a work email. Instead, I saw a digital avalanche. My father hadn't called to wish me a happy birthday. He hadn't called to ask if I was safe up here alone in the mountains. He was calling because he had lost control of the narrative. I opened the family group chat first. It was a forensic analysis of my Instagram post. Screenshots of the cabin were circled in red ink, like crime scene photos. My mother, Susan, had texted 3 times in rapid succession. "Gregory is pacing," she wrote. "You know he was eyeing that ridge for development. Why didn't you consult the firm before making a purchase like this?" Consult the firm. As if I were an employee making a requisition request, not a grown woman buying a home. Then came Alyssa. Her messages weren't worried, they were annoyed. "Seriously, Morgan? A shack?" she wrote. "That rugged aesthetic completely clashes with my luxury brand launch next week. Are you having a quarter-life crisis because you're single? Please tell me you aren't going to post any more pictures of that dump until after my event." It's off-brand. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. For years, messages like these would have sent me into damage control mode. I would have apologized. I would have explained that it was a fixer-upper, that I saw potential, that I didn't mean to upset anyone. I would have softened my own joy to make room for their egos. But standing there in the cold mountain air, smelling the pine sap and the sawdust on my clothes, I felt something shift. It wasn't anger. Anger is hot and messy. This was cold. This was clarity. They weren't panicking because I was in danger. They weren't panicking because I had made a bad investment. They were panicking because I had spent $320,000 without asking for permission. For my entire life, my father had used money as a leash. He paid for things so he could own them. He bought Alyssa's career, her apartment, her car. And in exchange, he owned her choices. He thought he owned mine, too. He thought my independence was just a phase he was indulging until I came back to the fold. But the moment I signed that deed, the leash snapped. That money was mine. Earned from 10 years of early mornings and late nights, designing gardens for people who actually paid their bills. Gregory wasn't angry because I bought a cabin. He was angry because he couldn't threaten to take it away. He couldn't cut me off because I was already standing on my own 2 feet. His power was an illusion, a shadow puppet on the wall that only looked big because I had been small. And now that I was standing up, the shadow was just a shadow. I didn't reply to the group chat. I didn't defend myself. I simply put the phone down, face first on the railing, and watched a hawk circle the valley below. They were waiting for me to engage, to argue, to play my part in the family drama. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. When my father finally called, he didn't even pretend to be concerned. There was no hello, no happy birthday, no "are you okay up there all alone?" He went straight for the throat. "Morgan," he said, his voice clipped and professional, the tone he used when he was negotiating a hostile takeover. We need to discuss this situation immediately. You've made a significant error in judgment. I leaned against the deck railing, watching the sun dip behind the peaks. It's not an error, Dad. It's a purchase. I bought a house. You bought a zoning nightmare, he snapped. I've seen the reports on that property. It's a teardown. And frankly, it's embarrassing. My daughter buying a shack in a premium district? People are going to think you're destitute. I can't have that kind of perception impacting the family brand right now. The family brand. Always the brand, never the family. The deed is in my name, I said calmly. It's not your concern. It is my concern when you're making impulsive financial decisions that reflect poorly on us, he countered. Listen to me carefully. I want you to transfer the deed to my holding company. I'll reimburse you for what you spent minus the fees, of course, and my team will manage the liability. We can tear it down, maybe integrate the land into a larger project down the line. It's the only way to salvage this mess. He paused, waiting for my gratitude. When I didn't speak, he played his next card. And while we're talking about finances, he added, his voice smoothing out into a fake casualness that made my skin crawl. Alyssa's launch party is running significantly over budget. We're looking at $85,000 now. I assumed you'd be contributing, but since you've thrown your money away on this pile of wood, I suppose I'll have to cover your share. Again. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. He wasn't just dismissing my achievement, he was rewriting history. He was painting me as the irresponsible child who needed rescuing, while simultaneously implying that my savings, my hard-earned money, should have been family resources available for Alyssa's vanity project. I looked down at my hands. They were rough, the skin dry and cracked from weeks of sanding floors and hauling lumber. There was sawdust under my fingernails, and a blister forming on my thumb. These were the hands of someone who built things, real things. Not brands, not images, not illusions. Alyssa's hands were probably manicured right now, holding a glass of champagne paid for by someone else. She lived a life funded by debt and Daddy's approval. I lived a life funded by sweat and equity. No, I said. Excuse me? No, I repeated, my voice steady and cold. I'm not transferring the deed. I'm not selling. And I'm certainly not paying for Alyssa's party. The cabin is mine. The money was mine, and the answer is no. You're making a mistake, Morgan, he warned, his tone dropping into that low register that used to make me freeze as a child. You don't understand how these things work. You're playing a game you can't win. The deed is recorded, Dad, I said. It's done. I hung up before he could respond. I didn't block him, not yet. I wanted him to know I was still here. Still listening. Just no longer obeying. I looked at my hands again. They weren't pretty, they weren't soft. But they were mine. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. The autumn leaves on the aspen trees turned gold, but the silence from my father wasn't peace. It was the deep breath before a scream. I showed up to work on a Tuesday morning, coffee in hand, ready to review the new blueprints for the downtown park project. But when I walked into my office, there was a man sitting in my chair. My boss, David, was leaning against the doorframe, looking uncomfortable. Morgan, he said, can we talk? I put my coffee down. What's going on? We received a formal complaint, he said, handing me a thick envelope, from the city planning board. And a separate inquiry from the ethics committee regarding your license. I opened the envelope. Inside was a code violation notice, not for the cabin, but for a project I had managed 3 years ago. A project that had passed every inspection with flying colors. Attached to it were letters alleging gross negligence, fraudulent use of funds, and insider trading. My hands didn't shake, they went cold. Who filed this? I asked, though I already knew. It was anonymous, David said. But the board member who called me mentioned they received a tip from a concerned party in the development sector. Someone who claimed you used kickbacks from that project to finance a personal real estate purchase. Gregory, he wasn't trying to teach me a lesson. He wasn't trying to get me to sell the cabin. He was trying to destroy me. I looked at David. You know this is baseless. I have the audits. I have the receipts. I know, David said. But until the investigation is cleared, I have to put you on administrative leave. I can't have you signing off on prints. Administrative leave. Unpaid. I walked out of the office with my box of personal items, feeling the weight of my father's rage. He didn't just want the land. He wanted me destitute. He wanted me crawling back to him, begging for a job, for forgiveness, for a roof over my head. He thought he was stripping me of my power. He thought my power came from my job title, from my salary, from my reputation. He was wrong. I didn't go home to cry. I didn't call him to beg. I drove straight to the county clerk's office. I sat in the basement archives for 6 hours, surrounded by dust motes and the smell of old paper. I pulled every permit my father had ever filed. I pulled the original survey maps for the mountain ridge. I pulled the transfer deeds for every property adjacent to my cabin. And then I saw it. A handwritten letter, tucked into the back of a zoning file from 1982. It wasn't digitized. It wasn't online. It was a ghost in the machine. The letter was from Mr. Henderson, the previous owner of my cabin. I recognized the signature from my closing documents. But this letter wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to the city council. To whom it may concern, it read, I am selling the south parcel to Gregory Whitman's holding company under duress. But let the record show that the north parcel, the summit, will never belong to him. I have placed a conservation easement on the land, effective immediately upon my death, or the sale of the property. The ridge is protected habitat. No commercial structures, no resorts, no subdivisions, forever. I stared at the paper. The north parcel was my cabin. Mr. Henderson hadn't just sold me a house, he had sold me a weapon. My father didn't know. He thought he could bully me into selling, then bulldoze the cabin and build his luxury ski lodge. He thought the only obstacle was me. But the obstacle was the land itself. I made a photocopy. Then I made a second photocopy. I put the original back in the file, drove to the post office, and mailed a copy to the ethics board with a note attached. Regarding the allegations of fraud, my funds are verified. Perhaps you should investigate the developer trying to build a resort on protected land. Then I drove up the mountain. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the engine hum. Feeling the weapon in my passenger seat. Gregory wanted a war. He wanted to burn my life down to the foundation to see if I would break. He forgot one thing. I'm an architect. I know how to build on a burn site. Gregory arrived at the cabin 3 days later. He didn't call first. He didn't text. He showed up in his polished SUV, navigating the rutted gravel road with the kind of aggression that suggested he was personally offended by the terrain. I was on the roof, replacing shingles. The sun was beating down on my neck, and my hands were black with roofing tar. I heard the car door slam, and looked down. He wasn't alone. Susan was there, looking anxious in her designer coat, clutching her purse like a shield. And behind them was a man I didn't recognize, burly, in work boots that looked brand new, carrying a clipboard. Intimidation. Morgan, Gregory shouted up at me. Get down from there before you kill yourself, we need to talk. I took my time. I secured the last shingle, wiped my hands on my jeans, and climbed down the ladder slowly. I didn't rush. I didn't scramble. I met them on the ground, standing on my own dirt. Who's your friend? I asked, nodding at the man with the clipboard. This is Mr. Davies, Gregory said. He's a contractor. I brought him to assess the safety hazards on this property. If the city condemns it, at least we'll have a professional opinion on file. The city isn't condemning anything, I said. And Mr. Davies is trespassing. Mr. Davies shifted uncomfortably, looking from me to Gregory. Enough, Gregory snapped. He pulled a checkbook from his jacket pocket. I'm done playing games, Morgan. This has gone on long enough. You're ruining your reputation, you're embarrassing the family, and you're wasting your life on a teardown. I'm making you one final offer. He scribbled a number on a check and ripped it out. He held it out to me. It was for $400,000. That covers your purchase price plus a generous profit, he said. Take it. Sign the deed over to me. Mr. Davies will handle the demolition, and we can all move on. I'll even make the ethics investigation go away. He thought he was saving me. In his mind, he was the benevolent patriarch swooping in to rescue his foolish daughter from her own mistakes. He truly believed that money could fix anything, even the truth. I looked at the check. Then I looked at Susan. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She was staring at the mud on her boots, wishing she was anywhere else. "You really want this land, don't you?" I asked. "It's a strategic asset," he said dismissively. "It connects to the parcels I already own." "It's just business, Morgan. Just business," I repeated. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out the folded photocopy of Mr. Henderson's letter. I handed it to him. "Read it," I said. He frowned, taking the paper. "What is this?" "It's the reason Mr. Henderson sold to me," I said. "And it's the reason you will never build a resort on this ridge." He started to read. I watched his face. I saw the moment his eyes hit the words conservation easement. I saw the moment the color drained from his skin. I saw the moment he realized that his money, his connections, his power, none of it mattered. He stopped reading. He looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. "This isn't legal," he whispered. "He can't do this." "It's recorded with the county," I said. "It's ironclad. The easement is attached to the deed in perpetuity. No commercial structures. No subdivisions. No resorts. If you buy this land, Dad, all you'll own is a very expensive nature preserve." He stared at me, the check still in his hand, now useless. "And one more thing," I added, my voice calm and steady. "I submitted my bank records to the ethics board yesterday. They cleared me of all fraud charges this morning, but while they were reviewing the file, they found it interesting that a prominent developer filed a false report against a licensed architect. They've opened an investigation into you, Dad, for malicious interference and filing false claims." The silence on the mountain was absolute. The wind stopped, the birds stopped. Even Mr. Davies stopped shifting his weight. Gregory looked at the paper, then at the check, then at me. He looked like a man who had walked into a room expecting a fight and found a mirror instead. He didn't say a word. He turned around, got back in his SUV, and drove away. Susan lingered for a moment. She looked at me, then at the cabin, then at the mountains rising behind it. "It's beautiful up here," she said softly. "I know," I said. She nodded, then turned and followed him. Mr. Davies tipped his hard hat to me and walked back to his truck. I stood there alone in the driveway, covered in soot and sweat, holding the deed to my home. The check lay on the ground where Gregory had dropped it, fluttering in the breeze like a dead leaf. I picked it up and tore it into pieces. Then I went back up the ladder to finish my roof. The aftermath wasn't loud. It wasn't an explosion. It was a slow erosion. The ethics investigation didn't put Gregory in jail, but it put him on the sidelines. His reputation in the industry took a massive hit. The whisper campaign he had started against me backfired. People saw a man petty enough to sabotage his own daughter to steal land, and they stopped taking his calls. Alyssa's party happened, but the photos looked strained. The funding Gregory had promised her was frozen because he was dealing with legal fees. For the first time, the golden child had to pay her own way, and the silence between us grew heavy and permanent. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't reach out to explain. I realized that in their version of the story, I will always be the ungrateful thief who stole the summit. And I made peace with that. I accepted the role of the villain in their narrative because it was the only way to be the hero in my own. I finished the cabin renovation in the spring. I spent my mornings drinking coffee on the deck, looking at the view I had fought for. The air was thin and clean, and the silence wasn't lonely. It was free. 1 year later, I hosted a small birthday dinner on the deck. No influencers, no networking, just 4 friends, who actually knew how old I was. I cooked over an open fire, and we drank wine out of mugs because I still hadn't unpacked the good glasses. In the guest bathroom, I hung a small frame on the wall. Inside was the original code violation notice. It was a joke now, a relic from a war I had already won. You cannot force people to see the view from your perspective. You cannot make them value your labor or respect your boundaries. But you can stop climbing their mountain. If you have ever had to become the villain to save your own sanity, tell me your story in the comments. I will be reading every single one from my deck.